feel like this is my deposition or something. So it's July 23rd, 2019. I'm working for Founders Ministry, and we release our first trailer for the documentary By What Standard. In that trailer, there's one image that appears for just a bit over a second. Twice. It's blurred, and it's of a woman who's sitting on a panel.
9 days later, 3 board members resign, not over a scandal.
It was because they did not want to be associated with questioning that woman.
That woman? Her name was Rachel Denhollander. Attorney, abuse survivor, the face of #MeToo evangelicalism. 4 years later, court documents would prove the trailer was right.
Massive conflicts of interest, a compromised investigation, over $1 million to her client.
And $13 million drained from the largest conservative Protestant denomination in America. But by then, it was too late.
Most people think that the abuse crisis in the SBC was straightforward. There was just predators in pulpits, a denomination that looked the other way, and survivors who just finally got justice. But that's not the story. That's the story you've heard, but that's not what happened.
In 1996, an economist named Gary North wrote a book called Crossfingers: How the Liberals Captured the Presbyterian Church.
He documented a 5-phase playbook over how you take over a denomination from the inside. Not with theology, but with procedure.
Phase 1, you exploit the moral vulnerability that the other side can't defend. Phase 2,
redefine who the real threat is. Phase 3, force a procedural change your opponents can't survive.
Phase 4, fill the empty seats. Phase 5, inherit everything.
And the Southern Baptist Convention, they followed the script almost step by step. And we're going to show you how they did it. Phase 1, exploit the moral vulnerability.
The Southern Baptist Convention has wrapped up a summit on racism in America. The denomination is hoping to bring healing by confronting its past support for slavery and segregation.
The Southern Baptists were already getting played before any of this started.
In 2011, the group did declare racism a sin and renewed efforts to reach out to Latinos, African Americans, and others.
For years, the denomination had been caving on social justice issues.
The problem is a lot worse than we think. What I mean by that is both individually, like I am a racist, and I'm going to struggle with racism and white supremacy until the day I die and get my glorified body.
Southern Baptists took a stand against racism at their annual meeting this week. They formally passed a resolution condemning, quote, every form of racism, including alt-right white supremacy.
Each apology was training them to accept guilt on someone else's terms.
Do you think we as believers have owned that history of sin in the past and our inability to reconcile as races? Do you think we've already owned that?
Well, I think we have to constantly be reminded of it.
By the time the abuse crisis hit, the SBC was already trained and primed for manipulation.
And they're about to find out what that training was for.
Leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention are gathered in Alabama this week, addressing the sex abuse crisis in their church, the nation's largest Protestant denomination.
It culminated in February 2019. The Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express published a joint investigation.
Found more than 700 people had been sexually assaulted by nearly 400 Southern Baptist church leaders and volunteers over the past 20 years.
Headlines said,
suppressed, ignored, and stonewalled sexual abuse allegations.
Cover up by leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Covered up and lied about.
Resistance, stonewalling, and even outright hostility.
For nearly 2 decades.
The SBC was protecting abusers.
A scathing new report commissioned by the Southern Baptist Convention describes extensive cover-ups by senior leaders who were, quote, singularly focused on avoiding liability.
Former executive committee member Rod Martin says this was part of something bigger.
We had a growing number of activists coming after the SBC about sex abuse at that leading up to that 2019 convention.
By June 2019, the SBC passes a constitutional amendment. Churches that harbor abusers can be disfellowshipped from the SBC. An abuse complaint committee also got created. And on the surface, that is totally reasonable. But here's the question nobody asked. Was the SBC really saying that for 175 years they'd been fine with churches harboring abusers? Of course not.
But when the moral framework is protecting children, who's going to argue with that? And that was the point. And the people running this playbook knew exactly what they were doing.
Then comes COVID. COVID killed the 2020 convention. No vote, no floor debate, no accountability. And in that vacuum, the pressure kept building.
Because most of the time when they speak up, they are trampled on. In fact, there is a very prominent survivor, a precious friend of mine, that this happened to just a year ago. Most of you know Jen Lyle.
The Jennifer Lyle case became the pressure point. 12 years of alleged abuse by seminary professor David Sills. He said it was a consensual affair. She said it was assault. There were no criminal charges ever filed, no witnesses to the alleged abuse. But Rachel Denhollander was involved as Lyle's attorney, and that detail changes everything.
So when she came forward and said that the entire relationship from start to finish, 12 years, was always and ever abuse, that it was never consensual, that story just didn't make sense to me. And so then I started to just ask questions like, well, what's the abuse that's being alleged here? Because that would help. Okay, are we in the realm of, you're saying you were emotionally abused or emotionally controlled in some way, some sort of psychological manipulation? Or are you saying, you were physically held down? What are we talking about? And the immediate reaction to me asking that question was, how dare you? How dare you question these allegations? How dare you not believe a survivor? And when it comes to Rachel, in fact, I started kind of looking through her social media going, well, what has her response to this been? Surely someone at some point has answered some of these questions. And what I would find was things like when someone would really mildly ask, well, what is this man, this professor alleged to have done? Rachel would come back very strongly and say, I am an attorney. I am Ms. Lyle's attorney. This is her other attorney. It has been investigated and confirmed to be criminal assault, which is impossible because it was never referred to the police. So no one could have investigated it and no one could have determined that it was criminal assault. And yet this was what was being disseminated among Southern Baptists. And we were told that this is not a position you can question.
The biblical standard is clear: 2 or 3 witnesses.
In this case, 0 witnesses, 0 charges. But Denhollander, and Russell Moore for that matter, made this the centerpiece of the pressure campaign on the executive committee.
And they used it like a battering ram.
Rachel Denhollander with Russell Moore then went to the ERLC's conference and from the stage on the platform declared that the executive committee, which was running Baptist Press, had deeply abused and scarred Jennifer Lyle because they weren't willing to print as a fact that she had been abused.
She trusted the SBC to protect her and to handle her story well. And instead of doing that, the Baptist Free Press changed the article after she saw it. They used the same language to describe her abuse that is used for consensual affairs. And a survivor of horrific predatory abuse, instead of being surrounded with love and care and support, was cast away as someone involved in a consensual affair. That happened last year to one of your own by one of your own, including members of your executive committee.
Leading into the 2021 convention, conservatives backed Mike Stone for president. But when crisis is needed, crisis can be found.
While we were there was a new abuse victim, supposedly. We don't know because all the police reports say that nothing was ever done to her. All the police reports, all the investigations find nothing. But Hannah Kate Williams They trot her out.
I would like to see leaders taking the recommendations of outside experts, not as attacks on their beliefs, but as tools to protect those in their care.
They have her approach Stone the night before the election. She has a perfectly, utterly friendly conversation with Mike Stone. This is all captured on surveillance video and a bunch of witnesses, a bunch of eyewitnesses. And within 30 minutes, she has it all over the media that Mike Stone had accosted her and just verbally abused her right there at the convention the night before his election, which of course is exactly what everybody does when they want to get elected president of the denomination. Of course, you know, that makes sense. By the way, the powers that be, the new people running the executive committee, have still refused to release the surveillance video I'm telling you about. But we know it exists. Several of us have seen it. It absolutely exonerates Stone. And the lawyers for the EC admitted this. They just wouldn't release it because it would be too embarrassing to people like Grant Gaines and others who used this girl as a prop. And if you don't believe they used her as a prop, ask her, because she proceeded to decide she had been used as a prop and started talking about that on Twitter, much to their horror, since they are leading pastors and men of God. In any case, all of this was coordinated to torpedo Stone's candidacy, but they didn't just want rid of Stone. They wanted rid of the conservatives who were in leadership in as much of the denomination as possible, but certainly the executive committee.
So Stone lost, and the winning side passed the motion that changed everything. A sexual abuse task force to investigate the SBC's own executive committee.
The executive committee, they manage the SBC's finances, properties, and their legal matters. 86 members, and the motion had one unprecedented requirement.
The motion included that the executive committee shall waive attorney-client privilege, surrender your legal shield for transparency.
Was anybody concerned about what that shield was there to protect? Remember the old saying, don't remove a fence without knowing first why it's there? But whatever it takes to look innocent, protecting women and children, what a perfect lever.
Phase 2, redefine the threat.
Gary North says that the next phase is use moral language to make surrender sound righteous. After the motion passed, the pressure campaign began. 6 former SBC presidents called for the waiver. Over 1,000 pastors, abuse survivors. The message from every corner of the denomination is if you have nothing to hide, then prove it. But the heaviest pressure came from the top.
On September 29th, 2021, Albert Mohler, president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, the SBC flagship institution, released a public statement directed at the executive committee.
He wrote that the convention would long remember those who helped this task force do its work and those who sought to obstruct it. He said the only real decision was how to comply with the mandate, not whether. And then he added, time has run out. That's not a pastor offering counsel. That's the most powerful man in the SBC telling the executive committee, surrender or be remembered as the people who protected abusers.
Every seminary president followed Albert Mohler's lead. Every denominational lead they piled on as well. And the executive committee members, those 86 people responsible for the SBC's finances, properties, legal protections, they were all being told by their leadership that defending fiduciary duty was the same as defending abuse.
They wanted us to waive attorney-client privilege because we have nothing to hide. Well, but that's not why you have such a thing as attorney-client privilege. Attorney-client privilege is a fiduciary duty, and it is a legal, ethical requirement necessary to allow clients to be able to speak honestly with their legal representation. If you don't have that, then every single discussion is discoverable. They can't talk to their lawyer meaningfully. And it's just absurd. It's so absurd that at the same time, the Biden Justice Department instructed U.S. attorneys that they may not ever ask anybody they're prosecuting to waive attorney-client privilege. That's how unethical this was.
Fiduciary duty isn't a technicality. It's a covenant bond. This applies to attorney-client privilege, doctor-patient privilege, husband-wife privilege. Remove that protection, and the people who need it most lose everything.
But notice the frame. Anyone who defends fiduciary duty is protecting the abuser. The institution's own legal safeguards became evidence of guilt. Defending procedure becomes proof you have something to hide. That's a lose-lose situation.
This is the actual genius of Phase 2. You don't have to prove anyone is guilty of anything. You just have to make defending the institution look like defending abuse. And once that frame is locked in, the real damages begin.
Phase 3, force the procedural surrender. So the pressure is enormous. 1,000 pastors, 6 seminary presidents, every survivor advocate in the country, all saying the same thing: waive the privilege or you're complicit. On October 5th, 2021, the executive committee voted. 44 in favor, 31 against. 17 members resigned in protest. 6 were attorneys or financial professionals. They understood exactly what was happening. Maybe the most stunning resignation of all, Jim Gunther, age 87. He had been general counsel for the SBC Executive Committee since 1966. 55 years, had never lost a case.
In his resignation letter, he said this: "We simply do not know how to advise a client when the client indicated a willingness to forgo this universally accepted principle of confidentiality."
55 years, unblemished record. And an 87-year-old man walked away because he would not participate in what he knew was wrong.
24 people are gone. They're all opponents of the leftists. J.D. Greer, Russell Moore, Rachel Denhollander, Grant Gaines, the rest of them, and above all, probably Jared Wellman on the executive committee. And because they were all gone, it's an 86-member committee. So J.D. Greer was able to fill all those seats with people to his liking, and they carried out their coup. They completely transferred power to their own faction over the period of those 2 years. And that's what it was all about.
The 44 men who voted yes were like the 3 men that resigned from Founders. They feared the backlash more than the breach itself. They thought that waiving the privilege would prove that they were the good guys. They had no idea what they had just made possible. They didn't realize that they just handed their opponents the weapons to destroy them. Attorney-client privilege doesn't exist to hide guilt. It exists to protect the institution from those who would weaponize the process. And that's exactly what happened next.
You just watched 44 men surrender the legal protections of the largest Protestant denomination in America because they were afraid of what people would think. How you handle your money is not a neutral act. Everything you have is under Christ's authority. Dominion Wealth Strategists helps Christian families think biblically and act wisely. Budgeting, debt management, estate planning, multi-generational vision, they're not just selling products, they're helping you make decisions consistent with your convictions. And unlike the men you just watched fold, Dominion takes their fiduciary duty to you seriously. They won't waive it. Not for pressure, not for optics, not for anybody.
Reform.money. Book your free consultation today. Let them know that Cross Politics sent you. Partners like Dominion are the reason that we can bring you stories like this one right here. And that's a trade that blesses everybody.
Now, the SBC handed over its shield, and the people who demanded that surrender were just getting started. Phase 4. Use the surrendered weapons.
So the old guard is gone, the legal shield is down, and now the investigation begins. And this is where it gets much worse than anyone actually realized, because the investigation itself was rigged from the start. In May 2022, Guidepost Solutions released a 288-page report. The media calls it a devastating blow, a bombshell. The most salacious finding that they had? That the executive committee kept a private list of accused ministers. The narrative? They were hiding abusers.
But in December 2025, court documents blew the whole thing open. An independent compliance expert named Amy McDougall, a former Air Force attorney and certified compliance professional, was retained to audit the Guidepost investigation against professional standards. Her findings were actually what was devastating. Not for the SBC, but for Guidepost.
First, Guidepost had no legal authority to conduct the investigation. Tennessee law requires a private investigator's license. Guidepost doesn't have one of those. Not in Tennessee, not in New York, where they're headquartered.
Guidepost's own president, Krista Tongreen, testified under oath that she had no idea whether the firm was licensed to investigate in any jurisdiction.
Conducting an unlicensed investigation in Tennessee is a Class A misdemeanor. Can't make this up.
But the licensing problem was just the beginning.
Secondly,
under oath, Guidepost had to admit they had never investigated anything. They did not investigate the Sills case. They did not try to contact David Sills at all and even ask him for his version of events.
they corroborated, meaning they took the accuser's word and asked around to see if other people had heard the same story. Oof. McDougall writes that it appears Guidepost relied on Miss Denhollander's assurances as a trusted business partner that Miss Lyle's allegations of abuse had been substantiated, or, in the alternative, did not need to be substantiated. Denhollander was the corroborating source.
They interviewed 300 to 400 people about Jennifer Lyle's allegations, but they never interviewed the accused, David Sills. They never interviewed Albert Mohler, the seminary president who first received the disclosure.
They never interviewed Eric Geiger, the supervisor Lyle told first. The three people with first-hand knowledge never contacted. And that's still not the worst of it. Third, and this is the kill shot.
Rachel Denhollander was wearing 4 hats simultaneously. Hat number 1, she was the attorney for Jennifer Lyle, fighting for maximum settlement against the SBC.
2, advisor to the Sexual Abuse Task Force overseeing the investigation. 3, advocate operating the abuse hotline funneling survivors into the investigation.
And hat number 4, editor of the Guidepost report shaping the findings.
What?
This is completely unethical. She's an attorney. She doesn't get to do those things. And moreover, she got called out for it by people like Krista Brown, who is possibly the longest term sex abuse advocate in the Southern Baptist Convention, and certainly Rachel's strongest supporter for ages and ages. And even Krista wrote an op-ed, a public article calling Rachel Denhollander out for her unethical behavior and conflicts of interest. She's driving this process.
That alone should have disqualified the entire investigation, but the paper trail keeps going further.
She advised the investigators, she represented the lead witness, she sat on the committee overseeing the investigation, and she edited the final report in direct violation of Guidepost's own engagement letter, which explicitly prohibited the task force members from editing the report before publication.
The compliance audit found her edit requests from May 17, 2022. In them, Denhollander confirmed that she was the driving force behind the investigation. Her words, "This would absolutely not be happening if Lyle's case had not happened." This has been the topic of conversation and the linchpin for why we are here. She then wrote exactly what she wanted Guidepost to include. Guidepost's response, "I'm okay with this if you want to modify the language. I've always felt we didn't add enough about the settlement." The person who engineered the investigation edited the report about her own client. The woman suing the SBC was telling the investigators what to write.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
In the financial web, well, it goes even deeper. Denhollander had referred guideposts to at least 3 prior engagements.
she referred them to Southern Seminary just months before the SBC investigation began. After the report published, Guidepost was awarded the Survivor Hotline contract.
Then they bid on a multi-million-dollar database contract.
McDougal's conclusion? Guidepost departed from many recognizable professional investigative standards by permitting conflicts of interest. The investigation lacked defined terms, a standard of proof, and due process. Note that, biblical due process.
It was, in her professional opinion, not an independent investigation. It was a public relations campaign masquerading as one.
And then the biggest, probably most salacious thing that came out of it were these emails from Jennifer Lyle to David Sills, where she talks about how much she misses him. And she talks about how she can't go, a month or 2 months without seeing him. That's too long. And how much she longs to be with him. And really just all of this documentation demonstrating that this looks very much like a consensual, adulterous relationship.
The result? Jennifer Lyle's attorney profited. The SBC was weakened, biblical law abandoned, and real victims are still waiting for justice.
If we'd had any victims, I would have been the first one to say, let's hang the guy who did this and let's pay out whatever we've got.
Phase 5. Inherit everything.
So what do we know? Well, we know the investigation was illegal. It was compromised. And it was edited by the woman who engineered it for her own client. What did it actually accomplish?
Biden's DOJ opened its own investigation in August 2022. 31 months, $2 million in legal fees. And then March 2025, Biden's administration closed the investigation.
We get the investigation back. It was a nothing burger.
Charges for sexual abuse?
Charges for cover-up?
Charges for conspiracy.
There was one charge.
They found one guy who lied to a federal agent about some nonsense, and so he got in trouble. But he didn't abuse anybody. He didn't cover up abuse of anybody.
$2,000 fine, 6 months house arrest. That was the devastating bombshell. Total cost to the SBC, $13 million. Legal fees, investigations, lawsuits. They sold their Nashville headquarters, depleted reserves from $13 million down to $4 million.
This isn't an ordinary $13 million.
We're talking about $13 million in tithes.
The generous gifts of Sunday school classes, widows giving their mites, special offerings for missionaries, work, evangelism, mercy ministry, it all came to pay off a completely unsubstantiated claim and accusation.
The denomination with 17 million members, 47,000 churches, the largest conservative Protestant denomination in America, gutted from the inside.
When you look at all of the pieces of this and how it played out over years, I mean, you have things like Russell Moore's chief of staff, Philip Bethencourt, years before recording private meetings. And that's bizarre, right? I don't do that. When you go to a meeting with colleagues to work out, some difference of opinion, do you record all the meetings? I don't do that. So I thought that was very strange. The leaking of Russell Moore's letters and the timing, that seemed pretty obviously orchestrated. He wrote these letters that, they're almost comical in the way that he is giving information to the recipient, that the recipient, which certainly already know, indicating that his real intended audience for the letter is the public. So he would do things like say, as you and I know, J.D. Greer, you and I have witnessed over years how Ronnie Floyd and this person have been incredibly negligent. I'm paraphrasing.
I'm barely scratching the surface here. It's unreal. It's just unreal. And it won't shock you that the people who wanted this whole nightmare were the people pushing critical race theory, were the people pushing what they called soft complementarianism, which is just women in the pulpit. You know, it's just leftists masquerading as conservatives. And since they can't argue about what they actually believe, they decided to demonize their opponents. That's what happened. And now the truth is out. The more court rulings we get, as we got in the Paige Patterson case, the more sworn testimony that is released from these lawsuits, particularly the one involving David and Mary Sills and Southern Seminary and Jennifer Lyle. The more we learn, the worse it gets. Not because there was abuse, but because there wasn't.
Phase 5 complete. Inherit everything. And if you think this was a one-time event, you haven't been paying attention.
This isn't new, and it's not unique to the SBC either. Harvard, Yale, Princeton Seminary, all were founded to train Christian ministers, and they all lost to liberalism. The PCUSA started ordaining women deacons in the 1950s, and by the 1980s, anyone who opposed women ordination was pushed out.
30 years from that first compromise to total capture. And now the PCA is considering female deacons. Want to bet what comes next?
Same pattern, same playbook every time. And the pattern works every time because the same weakness. The Bible identifies it in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. Adam was there during the temptation, silent, passive, standing by. He abdicated his responsibility. And when God confronted him, he blamed Eve.
God's verdict, because you listened to the voice of your wife. God held Adam responsible for that institutional failure, for a failure to remain faithful to his fiduciary duty.
The entire false abuse narrative in the SBC developed from men who were unwilling to stand up to women, and a particular woman. They did not want to defy Rachel Denhollander. And part of the reason I pinpoint that as the cause is because when you go back to the sort of the very beginning of how she became the abuse activist within the church, you have to remember that initially a few of them did stand against her when it came to C.J. Mahaney and his organization. So, you know, the Al Mollers and some of the others did say, well, wait a minute, you know, we think she's mischaracterizing, or what happened with C.J. Mahaney, his handling of abuse claims. We feel that she is not representing those truthfully, and she blasted everyone. And my sense is that that experience is what made all of these men go, I will never cross her again. I think they felt like they came away from that disagreement tarnished reputationally, and that they were putting, you know, possibly their own positions at risk. And so I think you have a lot of men who were really committed to never crossing her again. And what that meant was that you couldn't cross any of these other women who she was speaking for in terms of church too. So if all of them were saying, I'm traumatized and this was abuse because I didn't realize that I was in the sway of this other person's power, then none of these men are going to respond to that.
And that's what happened in the SBC. Men refused to stand up to women. They chose reputation over principle. They chose the fear of men over the fear of God, and they surrendered institutional protection to avoid being called names.
It's not biblical to say that adult women do not have moral agency. It's not biblical to redefine justice with psychological categories when God's word tells us clearly how to adjudicate claims.
Look, it's not biblical. It's not to say that an adult woman, let's take the Johnny Hunt case, has some sort of sexual encounter with an adult man, and then 10 years later says, in therapy, I realized that it wasn't consensual. I think if it's not consensual, you know it at the time, if you're an adult woman. And so that was the part that I always had a problem with, was that, you know, we were using these psychological definitions and not biblical definitions, because the Bible tells us that if a woman is being sexually assaulted, she has an obligation to cry out, right? She has an obligation to alert someone. And that was not only not happening, we had women coming out 10 years later and saying, well, after working with my therapist, even though I was a middle-aged mom of 5, I didn't realize that it was abuse, and that I wasn't, consensually participating until many years later. I just don't think that's biblical.
For Lyle, the highest ranking female employee of the entire Southern Baptist Convention, for her having been sex abused by a professor she had once or twice years earlier, and then conducted an affair with him across state lines for 12 years, going to his home, considered part of his family by his wife and kids for over a decade, while she was actually his boss, not directly, but because she had control of whether his books got published or not. And then when, I don't know exactly what happened, something triggered something, and all of a sudden she wants to make it into power dynamics, and she was abused. Well, okay, this affair started when you were 26. How do we just not have agency? Is there just absolutely no sin nature in women? Can a woman not actually take responsibility for what's obviously adultery that's going on in the home of the wife they're cheating on?
The question ultimately comes down to obedience. Obedience to God's clear word.
Adam knew God's word, but he listened to the voice of his wife. God's word clearly says that the first person to tell their story sounds compelling until the other side comes and tells their side of the story. That's basic Proverbs 18:17. That's basic biblical justice.
Biblical justice requires due process, careful evaluation of all sides, and at least 2 or 3 witnesses. But the Me Too movement insisted that the biblical justice, it wasn't sufficient. And it demanded that women always be believed, while trying to shame Christians who pointed to biblical passage about the sins of women.
Let's bring it back to the book, and how does Scripture tell us to deal with these issues? Because I think, things like saying that women can knowingly seduce powerful men, that is something that we see in Scripture. We see sinful women deliberately seducing powerful men. And I also think, what you will hear from a lot of those critics is they want to make certain passages hands off, like, how dare you? Like, if you try to bring up Proverbs that warn young men away from seducing women, they will say, how dare you? Or you are not allowed to bring up Potiphar's wife. Well, I'm not going to play that game. I mean, look, all of the Bible is open and available for us to reference. So if you are telling me, no, because of, these new psychological boundaries that you have, we can't bring up certain parts of the Bible, that is a you problem, because you are the one who's cordoning off certain parts of the Word of God and saying we can't apply those to our lives right now.
July 23, 2019. Just over a second of a blurred silhouette. 3 board members resigned rather than be associated with questioning one woman.
4 years later, court documents proved the questioning was actually justified. Massive conflict of interest, an illegal investigation, $1.05 million to her client, $13 million cost to the denomination. Not missions, not evangelism, empty activism, dead-end investigations.
Gary North documented exactly how the Christian church keeps getting played. Phase by phase, compromise by compromise, the same 5 steps. He warned that any conservative institution that didn't understand this playbook would fall to it.
Conservative Christians keep caving to the emotional pleas of well-meaning people, often women, asking men to surrender their duties before God.
Ultimately, what makes men vulnerable to manipulation is guilt. Guilty people are insecure, but forgiven Christians know they are righteous before God.
The accusations will come: racism, misogyny, protecting abusers. All these accusations, if you are repentant, if you are walking in the Lord, you will not be a soft target like those who are guilty. But guilty men are soft targets. Forgiven men are not.
It's hard to fight sin in institutions when there's sin in you. So where are you soft on sin? Where are you vulnerable? Where do you need to confess real sin so you can't be manipulated by emotional demands? The SBC couldn't shake a guilty conscience over slavery, and it was vulnerable to the manipulative accusations of women.
This stands as a warning for every conservative institution in America. It's not whether the playbook is coming for your institution. It is. The question is whether your men will stand. Those who fear the mob more than they fear God will serve the mob.
The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Proverbs 29:25.